Kurtz here. Welcome back to my reading nook. I was just settling in to read some passages from another really powerful book called The Kite by Khaled Hosseini. This is another book that's banned because it's a book that makes people uncomfortable. It touches on some very harsh topics like rape, violence, religion, homosexuality, and it uses a lot of very offensive language. Although it covers all these tough topics, it's also a story of overcoming adversity. It's a story of making up for the past by doing the right thing in the present. And it's a really powerful message told to us by an author who has some firsthand experience. So let's go ahead and just get into some of these passages. The first one comes to us from chapter 2. It says, "Hey Babalu, who did you eat today?" They barked to a chorus of laughter. "Who did you eat, you flat-nosed Babalu?" They called him flat-nosed because of Ali and Hassan's characteristic Hazara Mongoloid features. For years, that was all I knew about the Hazaras, that they were Mughal descendants and they looked a little like Chinese people. School textbooks barely mentioned them and referred to their ancestry only in passing. Then one day, I was in Baba's study looking through his stuff when I found one of my mother's old history books. It was written by an Iranian named Karami. I blew the dust off it, sneaked it into bed with me that night, and was stunned to find an entire chapter on Hazara history. An entire chapter dedicated to Hassan's people. In it, I read that my people, the Pashtuns, had persecuted and oppressed the Hazaras. It said the Hazaras had tried to rise against the Pashtuns in the 19th century, but the Pashtuns had quelled them with unspeakable violence. The book said that my people had killed the Hazaras, driven them from their land, burned their homes, and sold their women. The book said that part of the reason Pashtuns had oppressed the Hazaras was that Pashtuns were Sunni Muslims while Hazaras were Shia. The book said a lot of things I didn't know, things my teacher hadn't mentioned, things Baba hadn't mentioned either. It also said some things I did know, like that people called Hazaras mice-eating, flat-nosed, load-carrying donkeys. I had heard some of the kids in the neighborhood yell those names to Hassan. So that passage gives us an example of some of the racism that's brought to light in this novel. But it also counteracts that racism with knowledge, with historical context, and a person willing to look into that to see why things are happening. The next passage comes from chapter 5. We stayed huddled that way until the early hours of morning. The shootings and explosions had lasted less than an hour, but they had frightened us badly because none of us had ever heard gunshots in the streets. They were foreign sounds to us then. The generation of Afghan children whose ears would know nothing but the sounds of bombs and gunfire was not yet born. Huddled together in the dining room and waiting for the sun to rise, none of us had any notion that a way of life had ended. Our way of life. If not quite yet, then at least it was the beginning of the end. The end, the official end, would come first in April 1978 with the communist coup d'etat, and then in December 1779 when Russian tanks would roll into the very same streets where Hassan and I played, bringing the death of the Afghanistan I knew and marking the start of a still ongoing era of bloodletting. That passage really resonates for me because it's coming from the perspective of a child who's experiencing warfare, who's experiencing this extreme violence, and who's going through crises that no child should ever have to go through. And that's one thing that this book is full of, is these crises that people shouldn't have to go through. But it tells the story of people who have gone through them, and it gives us hope that we can make it through. The final passage comes from chapter 25. But as we spoke, I caught his eyes drifting again and again to Sorab sleeping on the couch, as if we were skirting around the edge of what he really wanted to know. The skirting finally came to an end over dinner when the general put down his fork and said, "So, Amir Jan, are you going to tell us why you have brought this boy back with you?" "Iqbal Jan, what sort of question is that?" Khala Jamila said. "While you're busy knitting sweaters, my dear, I have to deal with the community's perception of our family. People will ask. They will want to know why there is a Hazara boy living with our daughter. What do I tell them?" Soraya dropped her spoon, turned on her father. You can tell them. It's okay, Soraya, I said, taking her hand. It's okay. General Sahib is quite right. People will ask. Amir, she began. It's all right. I turned to the general. You see, General, my father slept with his servant's wife. She bore him a son named Hassan. Hassan is dead now. That boy sleeping on the couch is Hassan's son. He's my nephew. That's what you tell people when they ask. They were all staring at me. And one more thing, General Sahib, I said. You will never again refer to him as Hazara Boy in my presence. He has a name, and it is Sorab. No one said anything for the remainder of the meal. That passage kind of gives me goosebumps, knowing the story behind it. Essentially, it's this man who has done wrong in the past, and he has wronged this boy's father, Hassan. But he knows what he did was wrong. He's accepted that, and he's willing to change. He's trying to make amends for what the past has caused him to do, and he's trying to move forward by standing up for what he believes in, by doing what is right, and by making sure his story is told. And that's one of the main reasons why banning this book would be such a mistake, because it contains so many stories that need to be told, stories that can be related to by people from all genders, races, and people of all ages.